Vidham Dham Sajivam Sarvaitam Savadutam Vrajana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vasakans Vitam Sha Hey Krishna Karna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Brishu Bhanu Sudha Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchakalpa Trivyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Pranitinanda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 12. Dhruva Maharaj goes back to Godhead. Text number 5. Tad Gacha Dhruva Bhadram Te Bhagavantam Adokshajam Sarabhutatma Bhavena Sarabhutatma Vigraham Tagacha Dhruva Bhadram Te Bhagavantam Adokshajam Sarabhutatma Bhavena Sarabhutatma Vigraham. Ladies. Tat, therefore, Gacha, come, Dhruva, Bhadram, good fortune, Te, unto you, Bhagavantam, unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Adokshajam, who is beyond the concepts of material senses. Sarvabhuta, all living entities. Atma Bhavena, by thinking of them as one. Sarvabhuta, and all living entities. Atma, the Supersoul, Vigraham, having form. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. My dear Dhruva, come forward. May the Lord always grace you with good fortune. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is beyond our sensory perception, is the Supersoul of all living entities, and thus all entities are one without distinction. Begin therefore to render service unto the transcendental form of the Lord, who is the ultimate shelter of all living entities. Please repeat. My dear Dhruva, come forward. May the Lord who always graces you, may the Lord always grace you with good fortune. Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is beyond our sensory perception, is the Supersoul of all living entities, and thus all entities are one, without distinction. Begin, therefore, to render service unto the transcendental form of the Lord, who is the ultimate shelter of all living entities. Purport. Here the word Vigraham, having specific form, is very significant. For it indicates that the Absolute Truth is ultimately the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is explained in the Brahma Samhita, Satchit Ananda Vigraham. He has form, but his form is different from any kind of material form. Living entities are the marginal energy of the Supreme Form. As such, they are not different from the Supreme Form, but at the same time, they are not equal to the Supreme Form. Dhruva Maharaj is advised herein to render service unto the Supreme Form. That will include service to the other individual forms. For example, a tree has a form, and when water is poured on the root of the tree, the other forms, the leaves, twigs, flowers, and fruits, are automatically watered. The Mayavadi conception that because the Absolute Truth is everything, he must be formless is rejected here. Rather, it's confirmed that the Absolute Truth has form, and yet he is all-pervading. Nothing is independent of him. So the text again. My dear Dhruva, come forward. May the Lord always grace you with good fortune. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is beyond our sensory perception, is the Supersoul of all living entities. Thus all entities are one without distinction. Begin therefore to render service unto the transcendental form of the Lord, who is the ultimate shelter of all living entities. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Buddhaya Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gaurvani Pracharane Nirvishesha Srinivadi Paskatyade Siddharne. As mentioned here in the purport, Itatara Mula Nishechanena Triptyanti Tatskanda Bhujo Pashaka Prahanarachayatandriyanam Tataiva Sarvahunam Achuteja. That if one waters the root of the tree, then the water goes to all the leaves and the branches. If one supplies food to the stomach, then all the different parts of the body are served. Similarly, if one serves Lord Achyuta, then the demigods and all other living entities are satisfied. The example given in the Srimad Bhagavatam is when Duryodhana wanted to chastise the Pandavas who were living in exile. And therefore, when Durvasa Muni was visiting him, he suggested to Durvasa Muni that the prasadam with the Pandavas in the forest is a first-class picnic. So he decided to take his 60,000 disciples with him to have a picnic with the Pandavas in the forest. But Duryodhana told him to go at a time where he knew the Pandavas would not be able to supply food to 60,000 visitors. Durvasa Muni had given Draupadi a pot that as long as she had not eaten, the pot could supply unlimited food to guests. Duryodhana, knowing this, sent Durvasa Muni at the time where he knew the Pandavas would have been finished eating. Durvasa Muni, when he arrived there with the 60,000 followers, Draupadi was very upset because she knew she would not be able to supply the food to to Durvasa Muni and his followers because she had already eaten. But Yudhisthira Maharaj told Durvasa Muni and his followers to go to and take bath in the Ganges before prasad. Of course, to feed 60,000 sages, it would be hard to pick 60,000 leaves in time. But it wasn't exactly the feast that the sages were looking forward to, even if they could shake off 60,000 leaves from the branches. In any case, at that time, Lord Krishna, being omniscient, he came and he asked for some prasadam also from Draupadi. She began to cry, thinking that first I can't feed 60,000 sages and Durvasa Muni, and now I can't even feed Krishna. Krishna said, no, it's all right. Just look in the pot, see if there's anything left at all. And there was a little bit of sabji left in the pot, which they gave to Krishna. And when he ate the prasad, this little bit of sabji, he felt completely satisfied because it was offered by his devotees. And therefore it said the whole universe felt satisfied, as an example. Now as Durvasa Muni and his followers were bathing in the Ganges, they were amongst all the living entities who felt satisfied, and therefore they knew that if there was a big feast waiting for them, they would not be able to eat anything. Durvasa Muni and his followers immediately fled from the Ganges and disappeared, and that way Krishna was able to save Draupadi and the Pandavas from the curse of Durvasa Muni. Not only due to his omniscience, but also because if Krishna is satisfied, then he can satisfy all living entities who become satisfied, if that's Krishna's desire. Because Krishna is always satisfied. But under certain circumstances, all living entities become satisfied when Krishna is satisfied. Now, how to satisfy Krishna? What does it mean to be satisfying Krishna? There are different levels of devotees, and they satisfy Krishna to different degrees. Indeed, even the Varna and Ashram system is all meant on Yagyavai Vishnu. Even one approaches Krishna like a Jendra out of distress, Krishna is satisfied because there's some reciprocation based upon the devotee acknowledging Krishna's position and relying upon Krishna in some way. So Krishna appreciates that. For Dhruva Maharaj, we have here the example of Dhruva Maharaj. Out of desire for some material gain and material opulence, he underwent austerity to please Krishna. So Krishna was so pleased that he gave him a planet greater than that of his great-grandfather, Lord Brahma. But Krishna is not completely satisfied. Of course, at the end, Dhruva Maharaj, at the end of his austerity, although he was looking for some kingdom greater than that of his great-grandfather, Lord Brahma, Still, he became a pure devotee, and therefore Krishna was completely satisfied. Higher than that is the sages of Naimisharanya, who are inquisitive about who is the absolute truth and what is the process by which we can obtain him in Kali Yuga. And therefore they ask 6 relevant questions to understand what is reality. And of course, Prahlādānanda Swami, who spoke the Srimad Bhagavatam to them, of which we're reading, he gave them the information by which Krishna could be satisfied. Savai pumso puro dharmo, puro hokshaje, haituk apratiyatayi atma suprasidate. That dharma, that highest dharma, is that which one renders service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, such service should be uninterrupted and haituki apratiyata, and without any material motivation, in order to actually suprasidati, in order to satisfy oneself. Now, this is the same thing Krishna says throughout the Bhagavad Gita and all scriptures. This is why we're hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, to understand this. First of all, to understand that Krishna is the goal, to develop love for Krishna, prema pamartha mahan, and the method of doing it is explained in different ways, at different places. But the main method is Satam prasangam amavirya samvido bhavanti rikarana rasayanam kata ijjo shavarashva vargavartani shararatir bhakti anukramishati. Amongst the satams, those who are interested in eternality, after all, we're eternal, we should be interested in what's the existence of eternality. This is called satam prasanga. And when they have association, what do? Mamavirya samvido. They talk about Krishna. Satam prasangam mamavirya samvido bhavanti rit karna rasayanam kata. Bhavanti means to develop, to become. And what becomes? What should be the difference? What should be the difference? Bhavanti rit. Rit means the heart. Karna, the ear. Rasayanam. So, if we allow the message of the Bhagavatam to enter into the ear and go into the heart, then it wakes up the soul, ourselves. Now, after hearing Bhagavatam, if we're not waking up, if we're going to sleep, that's not a very good sign. It means our ears are not allowing the sound vibration to enter into our heart and wake ourselves up. Tajjoshavat, ashvavargavarman. And our first business is to get liberated from the material concept of life. We don't have to hear about Krishna's pastimes with the gopis in the bushes of Vrindavan. We have no actually real access to that, because anyone who's absorbed in the Bali concept of life will simply reflect upon such narrations in terms of one's own experience. Therefore, Krishna says, Janma karma chame divyam evam yo veti tatvataha tyakvateham punarjanma naiti mam eti sarjana. That we're not really interested in just some theoretical, some extraordinary activities of Krishna in the spiritual world, or we're not so much concerned about his extraordinary activities even in this world. We're more concerned in tattva. What is the actual experience, as Krishna says, Janma karma chame divyam evam yoveti tattvata. We're interested in experiencing Krishna consciousness in this world. Therefore, Srila Prabhupada says in the second canto twice, he points out that it's much more important for the conditioned souls to hear about Krishna's pastimes in the external energy than to hear about his pastimes in the internal energy. So we want to experience Krishna in this, practically in this experience that we're having now. Then, when we develop that experience, then when we hear about Krishna's pastimes in the internal energy, we'll be able to experience those also. But unless we first become purified of the external energy, then we won't be able to experience either Krishna in this world or in the spiritual world. Now, of course, it is said that if we hear about Krishna's pastimes in the internal energy, then we become purified. But Prabhupada did not always agree with that. In Los Angeles, when they were discussing the Gopi Bhava Club, he said if you hear prematurely about Krishna's pastimes in the internal energy, instead of becoming purified, you'll become putrefied. Not that we don't want to hear, we're against Krishna's pastimes in the internal energy, or as Prabhupada said to the Back to Godhead devotees, we're not boycotting the gopis. But we're not trying to imitate the gopis either, or use our imagination wrongly to assume that just by hearing about Krishna's pastimes in the internal energy, we become elevated to that platform, especially if we don't understand them properly. Therefore, Satam prasangam mamavirya samvido bhavanti rikarna rasayanam kata. Now, this rasayanam, this nectar, this higher taste we're looking for, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Machita machkata prana, bodhiyantas parashparam, katayantasmam nityam tushanti cha ramanti cha. The thoughts of my pure devotees, they dwell in me. Their lives are surrendered to me, and they derive great satisfaction and bliss by enlightening one another and conversing about me. So what, basically speaking, the class, what we should be hearing about, the class or a reading or a studying, how to engage our senses in Krishna's service, how to understand things properly, that's called sambandha, how Krishna, it's all Krishna's energy. There's nothing outside of Krishna's energy. In that sense, everything is one. But our duty is to utilize the energies that Krishna is supplying to us, what's within our realm of influence, not just our realm of concern, how to utilize those energies in Krishna's service under the direction of his representatives. So we have so much energy. We have these books, we have our body, we have our minds, we have relationships, we have so many different things. So we should be much more concerned, for instance, how to organize our life, our desk, our belongings, our minds, in such a way that throughout the 24 hours a day, we cannot help but think about Krishna. And the Lord's promise is the one who does that, he's guaranteed to go back to the spiritual world. So how to utilize our chitta and prana. Chitta means our consciousness, and prana means, basically speaking, how to utilize our energy to properly engage under the proper authority, the energies that Krishna has given us to engage in his service. Then we become tushanti. If we do that, then we'll get freed from the lower modes of material nature. And we'll rise up to the platform of goodness and liberation. Toshna ashvavarga varmani. Then we'll be able to have pure senses by which we can experience Krishna. If our senses are not pure, then we can only lick the bottle of honey and we won't get a taste, no matter what we hear about. But if we learn how to utilize our senses during the day and our mind in Krishna's service, and then become purified, then it will be much more likely than when we're chanting our rounds, Hare Krishna, then we'll be able to experience something other than just moving our tongue and lips, hopefully. Or chanting some name, as Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, chanting some letters of the alphabet. And chitta, we also not only have to do something, but we have to also engage our consciousness. And what is that consciousness? It's Ashradadana, Tatradadana Munaya. Ashradadana Munaye, Ashradadana Munaya, Jnana Raga. See, it's no, I'm sorry. Shravana, Ashradadana, that's not right either. Anyhow, second canto, and the verses begins with where it says Shradavan, Tatradana Purusho. No. Anyhow, the verse says that Shushusho Shradadhanasya Vasudeva Kataruchi Sanmahat Sevaya Vipra Punyatirtha Nishevana. So the idea is that to hear is Shravana. So, but this hearing is not just regular hearing. Let's see, what was the first word again? Tatchadadana Mune. No. Shushusho. Su means to hear nicely. Actually, hearing nicely means to have our minds open. Su actually means open, receptive. Just like sukha. Ka means air. Space, actually. Ka means space. And su means good space. So when we have good space in the body, when we're not constipated, and the blood's flowing nicely, the airs of life are flowing nicely, and everything's flowing nicely in a regulated way, in the right direction, freely, then we're happy in this body. It's called sukha. And when we get constipated, the airs are flowing erratically in the body, the nerves are disturbed, our minds are disturbed, everything's disturbed, then it's called dukkha, bad space. Therefore, shusho means to hear nicely. Sushusho, but this hearing nicely means it includes not only hearing, but it also includes the two other vital ingredients of hearing, namely submission, inquiry, and service. So this is what when our minds are open, then there's submission included, then there is inquiry, because otherwise, unless we're inquisitive, our minds would not be open, and the desire to do something. That's called sususho. It's all the three are included, namely inquisitiveness, submission, inquisitiveness, and a desire to render service. And how is that the service rendered? Sushusho Shradadhanasya. So Shradadhanasya means, Prabhupada translates it, not only Shraddha means sad and rit, going back to that verse about Sitam prasangam mama virya samvido bhavanti rit karna visayanam kata. So Shraddha, da means to give, and sad means the heart, rit. So to give the heart to the activity, not only to do the activity, if we're actually doing it with an open mind, inquisitive mind, to understand Krishna, submissive mind, to understand, then the next thing is Shradadhanasya. Prahlādānanda means to have the heart in the activity. Putting the heart in the activity means to do it with care and attention. This is what we're trying to learn, not only to become submissive, to become inquisitive, and to render service, but it should be done with care and attention, which is the same thing that Krishna says in the next verse, that Sadatam Kirtayanta, no, that's not right either. Machkita Machkata Prana Bodhiyantash Parashparam Gatayantasmam Nityam Tu Shanti Charamandicha Tesham Sadatam Yuktanam Bhajantam Priti Purvakam. So Krishna is repeating the same thing there. Tesham Sadatam Yuktanam. Care and attention. Attention means we're concentrating, we're doing it consistently. Our minds are not wandering. We're not distracted by other things. We're consistently engaged in that activity. And Priti Purvakam, with care, with affection for Krishna. And then Dadami Buddhi Yogam Tam. Then we get realization. Then we begin to perceive things as they actually are. Then we start experiencing, understanding the tattva, who Krishna really is, who we are, where we are, what's going on here, how to go back to the spiritual world, how to realize get liberation. All these things are revealed if we hear properly, with care and attention, if we hear submissively, we hear with inquisitiveness, with a desire to render service. And then when we render service carefully, attentively, consistently, then Krishna gives us the Dhammi Buddhi Yogam Tam. He enlightens us so we understand things, how to actually make progress in devotional service. And when we pass the test of Krishna, we pass the test of the spiritual master, then Yesham what is it? What's the first word? Yesham antikatam. No, that's not right. Yesham antikatam partha. Jananam punya karamanam. Tedva. No, that's it. What's the actual first word? No, what's the first word? Tesham. Yesham antikatam. Yesham evanukam partha. Jananam punya. No. Aham agyana jam tamaha nasham yamyatma bhavashto gyana dipena bhashvataha. Out of compassion for them. How to invoke Krishna's compassion? Not by going before Krishna and crying, "Oh Krishna, I'm so depressed, help me." No, Krishna says, "Masuchaha," exactly the opposite of getting Krishna's compassion. He says, give up all this worrying. You may worry and come before me, I'll help you out. But Krishna is not compassionate for people who are, he's compassionate in one sense to everyone. But to actually invoke Krishna's compassion, anukampam susikshamana bunjana evatma kritam vipakam vidvakpa vupir vividan manaste tadvagri. What's the first word of that? No, what's the first? What's that? The Bhagavad. But what's the first word on that last line? Driveta sanmuk. Driveta sadayabhak. Driveta sadayabhak. So one becomes inheriting, one becomes the right to inherit the kingdom of God. And how is that? Same idea is there, but a little different from a point of view. That how to invoke Krishna's compassion, that tat eva nukampam sumikshamana. So, anukampam. on a continuous compassion, not just a little compassion, but eternal compassion, eternal relationship with Krishna. Tat evan anukampam ikshamana. Su, again, hearing very nicely. Hearing in such a way as iksha, we see what Krishna is talking about. We're actually able to see things properly so that our minds are in Krishna consciousness. Su iksha mana. Su, nicely. Iksha means to see, like in the Brahma Samhita. Krishna has blooming eyes like lotus petals. Iksha, his eyes, to see with the eyes. Tate nukampam susamikshamana mana bunjana evatna kritam vipakam. So it's not enough even to do our activities with care and attention, to do them steadily, but the real thing is the test comes that we have to pass. As Prabhupada writes in the Bhagavad Gita, that knowledge of Krishna comes in disciple succession, that Krishna is the original spiritual master, and a person in the disciple succession can convey the knowledge of Krishna as it is to his disciple. No one can become spiritually realized by manufacturing his own process as the fashion of foolish pretenders. The Lord is the real. So then one should accept the spiritual master like a menial servant without false prestige. Satisfaction of the self-realized spiritual master is the secret of advancement in spiritual life. Inquiries and submission constitute the proper combination for spiritual understanding, and let there is submission and service, inquiries from the learned spiritual master will not be effective. And here, one should be able to pass the test of the spiritual master. And when he sees the genuine desire of the disciple, he automatically blesses his disciple with genuine spiritual understanding. So we have to come to the platform of trying to do things consistently, consistent sadhana, with some priti purvakam, with some affection or care, attention, some concern. But then we should try to do it even when we're happy and distressed, even when the obstacles come, even when we don't want to do it. Then we do it with intelligence. And then Krishna says, we become eligible to inherit the kingdom of God. Tate nukampam susamikshamana punjana evatma kritam vipakam. We should know that whatever is happening to us is not by accident. It may be an arrangement for Krishna, but it's actually when we get the tests, when we're under the most stress, that we make the most advancement. Because it should invoke within us a desire to go on and serve Krishna in spite of the difficulty. That's why Kunti, in spite of all the problems they had, she was praying for more problems. Because when there was problems, they had learned the art of relying on Krishna. And therefore, their minds became more absorbed in Krishna consciousness. They didn't take shelter of other things. They took shelter of Krishna. And therefore, Queen Kunti said, they wouldn't see any more repeated birth and death. So it's a science. We have to find out the science. If we want it tattvataha, to realize Krishna, we have so much to do, so little time to waste. And the most important thing is, somehow or another, in this age, not to hear about Krishna's pastimes with the gopis. That we may hear, it's not wrong to hear that, but in the right attitude. But the most important thing is how to serve the Sankirtan movement of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Shri Krishna, Chaitanya, Radha Krishna, Nahiyanda. That is Radha and Krishna. And their pastimes in the Sankirtan movement is actually not different from the pastimes in the internal energy. This is our opportunity to enter into this internal energy by performing in this world the Sankirtan movement. Not trying to artificially enter into some other world, what we may not be eligible for. at this particular time. That's how to become eligible, enter into that other world, the spiritual world. By living in the spiritual world, by engaging the Sankirtan movement in this world. Then, according to our eligibility, according to our seriousness, then the result will be that Krishna will automatically appear within our heart. If we accept this is Krishna's energy to be utilized in His service under the authority that Krishna has given us through His disciple succession, then we'll become tu shanti. We'll become satisfied that I'm making progress. That actually my heart is becoming purified. My attitude is becoming refined, so that I'm actually able to actually think of pleasing Krishna seriously, not as just an afterthought. Think my relationship with Krishna becomes real because I'm trying to do something real for Him. Namely, to help bring His other children back to the spiritual kingdom, which includes ourselves too. Then Krishna will automatically, naturally, spontaneously appear within our consciousness, and that's called Krishna consciousness. But if we don't recognize this is Krishna's energy, we don't utilize it in Krishna's service according to His authorities to spread Krishna consciousness, then we won't have the attitude of trying to please Krishna. But if we have that attitude, then automatically we'll remember Krishna. And that's called Krishna. That is the perfection of the activity. Not only prana, our energies, which we have to use in Krishna's service, but also our chitta. And the more we engage our energies and our chitta in whatever is happening, then the more we make spiritual advancement. The more we become conscious of Krishna in reality. And then we can understand Krishna in truth. And as we become more absorbed in Krishna consciousness, then eventually we can enter into meditation, trance of Krishna, out of love, out of actual experience of what love really means for Krishna. Now in sadhana bhakti, we have to learn the science, and we follow the science, then eventually we'll experience what actually love is in truth, when Krishna reveals that to us, and then our perfection of life will be there. Anyway, I hope I didn't make it too confusing, but we should examine the science, and then what will wind up, we'll keep our desks neat, we'll organize our belongings, we'll wash our clothes, we'll wash our hands before we eat, we'll chew prasadam, we'll take prasadam as a service to Krishna. Everyone we meet, we'll think about how to serve them, to help them become Krishna conscious. We'll take this world seriously for what it's meant for, and not try to escape it to go somewhere else in our imagination and go nowhere. So I'll stop there. Thank you. Any questions or comments? Yes.
I have a quick story and a question that follow-ups. Because you were saying about not hearing beyond our qualification. I had one friend, he was in Vrindavan, and he came across one devotee who started telling him all of these, esoteric things that he was definitely not ready for, and also in a very unpalatable way. And he said he became so disturbed that he couldn't stand in front of Radha and Krishna. He would go and kind of walk past to Krishna Balaram, and it took him some time to kind of, he had to go to get some guidance and try to understand these things. So, just to say that how important it is not to, go above our qualification for so many reasons. My question is, I remember reading a purport where Srila Prabhupada said that by hearing the Rasa Leela from a bona fide source, one can purify lust.
The pastimes of the...
But then he also says that the qualification to hear is being completely purified in the heart.
Yes.
So how to understand that?
Well, this is in the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. If you're on the stage of bhava, you want to become completely purified. You've already surpassed nishta, ruchi, sakti, bhava, and now you want to come to the platform of prema. Then you can meditate on these pastimes with a pure heart, because you have spiritual senses. Then you'll become completely purified. It's not meant for everyone. If one is not at the stage of nishta, you hear about Krishna's pastimes and the internal energy, that one may identify them as something ordinary, like an ordinary relation between a boy and girls. Instead of making advancement, one will become degraded, like the sahajas. So to take a verse out of context and apply it when it's not applicable to oneself, if one has forgot about the other, if there's 18,000 verses in the Srimad Bhagavatam, this is around 9,000. If you forget about the other 9,000 verses, we might not get the effect that we're desirous of. Otherwise, why didn't Shukadeva Goswami just quote that verse? Everyone hear the Rasa Leela. Why did he waste his time with the other 9,000 verses? No, we're only eligible to understand the 10th canto. We've thoroughly understood the first 9 of them. And they don't mention about hearing Rasa Leela in the other 9 cantos. Yes.
Thank you for a wonderful class, Maharaj. So many nice points. Just on this last question, before we get to Bhagavatam, we're supposed to understand Bhagavad Gita. And that's why it's so important to associate with Prahlādānanda Maharaj, because he knows Bhagavad Gita and he presents clearly the teachings of Krishna in Bhagavad Gita. And if you understand Bhagavad Gita, then you understand in the spiritual world there's nothing gross. There's no gross. So if somebody approaches you trying to tell you something about the spiritual world in a gross way, then you immediately know this person is a nonsense. There's nothing gross in the spiritual world. There's no gross sensual activity in the spiritual world. So if somebody approaches you on that basis, immediately you know this person is a rascal. There's no gross sensual activity in the spiritual world. Prabhupada says that clearly, lecturing on the 3rd canto, the Kingdom of God. He said, there's no sex life in the spiritual world, and devotees were kind of shocked. There's no sex there, and therefore there's no abortion. Prabhupada said there's nothing gross there. So if you accept that, even theoretically, then when you hear all these gross depictions of so-called Rasa Leela, then you understand this person is a nonsense. There's nothing gross in the spiritual world.
Hi, Krishna Maharaj. I was also thinking along the lines of Kishore, the last verse of the 30th chapter of 10th canto, Vikriditam Brajavadum Idam Cha Vishnun. I think, in one sense, I agree that, yes, it's not mentioned in the other 9,000 verses, but I think the next line, Shraddhanvito, that you have to hear with a pure devotee, Satam Prasangan Mama Vir Samvido.
That's qualification to hear it, but that's not the only qualification.
So I think that, hearing from a great devotee, like Srila Prabhupada mentions in the back of the Krishna book, that even those who are materialists, they can take benefit from this Krishna book.
That's all right, but what Prabhupada says exactly, he said that even those who are materialists, if they hear from the right source and they have the right attitude, then they can also, take some pleasure. If they think it's a relationship between a boy and a girl, but if they hear from the right source with the right attitude, they can also make spiritual advancement. But if they have the wrong attitude, it doesn't matter who they hear from.
Yeah.
Then they'll get degraded, actually. The example is given that in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, that one man had a wife whose name was Radha. And whenever he heard about Radha's pastimes with Krishna in the Srimad Bhagavatam, he remembered his lusty affairs with his wife. Or the idea of that story where the lady, she had a goat named Radha, and the goat died. She was very despondent, so she went to hear the Bhagavat Saptah. And when she went there, she found out that the speaker, he had a beard exactly looked like her goat's who had died. And therefore, during the 7 days he was speaking about Radha and Krishna's pastimes, every time she heard the name of Radha, she remembered her dead goat and started to cry. And every time she looked at the speaker, she saw his beard and it reminded her of a dead goat, and she began to cry. So for 7 days, she hearing the Bhagavatam, she was constantly shedding tears and crying. So the speaker at the end of the Bhagavatam reciter, he came and offered full obeisances to her in front of the crowd of many thousands of people and said, "Oh great lady, you're so advanced, you're always in ecstasy hearing the Bhagavatam. Even you look at me, you're in ecstasy because I'm reciting the Bhagavatam. Please accept me as your servant. How did you become so advanced?" So she said, actually, whenever my goat, the reason why I came to this Bhagavatam recital is because my goat named Radha died. So every time you said the name of Radha, you reminded me of my goat, and I became emotional and disturbed, and I began to cry, remembering my dear goat, Radha. And every time I looked at you, because her beard was exactly like yours, you remind me of my dead goat. And therefore, looking at you, I became emotionally overwhelmed. I began to cry. So, we should understand, if people are not spiritually elevated, they may not be, when they hear the words Krishna or Radha, it may not be they're remembering Radha and Krishna, they're remembering their own lusty activities, their own material conceptions of life. Yes?
Follow-up question. You were mentioning that the Lord's, for us to understand the Lord's pastime with the external energy is more important than understanding the Lord's interaction with the internal energy. I was wondering, how do you reconcile that with Priti Purvakam? Because I feel...
Priti Purvakam.
Yeah, to get that favorable
well, because,
service.
Priti Purvakam means you treat people as a human being, for instance. Prabhupada said, you can tell a Vaishnava whether they're a gentleman or a lady. It's called Priti Purvakam. That when we're dealing with Krishna's energies, we don't throw things, we don't serve prasadam by throwing it on people's plates. We should have some consideration. It's like when we do arti, should be some kind of, finesse to it. We should do things carefully. We should organize our life carefully for Krishna's service. It should be done nicely. That's called Priti Purvakam. Not haphazardly, not disorganizedly, not with any care or not any attention. Therefore, if we have some responsibility, we should be careful that we're fulfilling it carefully and attentively. Or else we may not get the full effect of our devotional service. And we're too distracted by doing other things, we may be neglecting what we're actually supposed to be doing. Anything else? Thank you. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaur Premanande Haribol.